this guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
This emergency order must be abandoned. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Saint-Gelais. To Mr. Saint-Gelais or Mr. Gilbert, we've heard from people, and people from my riding think that the caribou is threatened. So I'd like to know, when we talk about threatened species, do you agree with that, or do you think differently? Well, Mr. Martel, let's talk about the facts. The facts, there is just one type of caribou in Quebec, the woodland caribou, a subspecies. So there's just one subspecies of caribou in Quebec, the woodland caribou, and there are 3 ecotypes. The migratory one further in the north, there's the boreal caribou in the forest, and the mountain caribou in mountainous regions. So the ecotypes are defined like that by biologists, and so it's based on the environment or the place where the caribou live. So in the north, the migratory, the forest type, and then the mountain type. So that's the reality of the subspecies, the only subspecies that exists in Quebec. So it's important to understand that. If we look at the boreal ecotype, the caribou that lives in the forest, the different data we've had since 2013. So the plan for their recovery and the Gélinas Commission, the report from 2023, the data give us a relative stability between 2013 and 2023 for the boreal ecotype. And then the boreal ecotype, the latest inventory have highlighted that 80% of the individuals surveyed are either in protected areas or north of the northern limit where there is no forestry happening. So when you look at the overall picture of the boreal ecotype, you have to recognize that there's just one subspecies present in Quebec, and the boreal ecotype, we have to be specific about that and look at the count for those individuals. For all of the subspecies, we can see that the subspecies is not threatened in Quebec. Mr. Saint-Gelais, you've had consultations on that. Have you had the opportunity to speak about this topic? Because it seems you've held consultations, you've been involved. Have you been able to say what you're saying today? Mr. Martel, is your question for federal consultations? Yes, federal consultations. Look, for federal consultations, what we've been told during the first technical meeting, we were told that the order was prepared and that there won't really be any changes, significant changes that can be presented for the concerned areas. So to us, it has shown that there wasn't really any possible angle for discussions, because what we were told, and we were also told at the first technical meeting, that the order was made in the spirit of balancing protection and the impact on the sector. So you'll understand that we saw, unfortunately, that it wasn't the case because the answers were not obtainable, and to not be able to make it significantly, so there wasn't anything we could change.
Mr. Gilbert, when we talk about the idea of an emergency in this order, what do you have to say about that? Well, as was said, the forest ecotype is a subtype. There are 180,000 of them in Quebec, and the numbers are going up. So what we don't really understand, because the woodland caribou has been here for many years, and in Pipmoincan, there's already been an 80% disturbance rate of the environment since the 80s. And in the Pipmoincan sector, In the past, we found that there were 135 caribou. And then in 2012, there were 98 rather. And then later on, we found that there were 225. So what conclusions can we take from this? There is no emergency. So we're also going to look at the number of females in the We have biologists, specialists that look at this, and what they say is that we need to be very careful with the numbers that we have here, because the females, when they hear the helicopters, when they're going to identify how many caribou there are often going to run away. So the difficulty is that we may not have the correct numbers, and so experts are telling us to be careful when we're looking at this data. Thank you. We'll listen to Ms. Chatel now. Thank you very much. Since 2016, Quebec has said that there is a decline in the species and that they were going to create a strategy. Do we have a strategy? So we have been working for 4 years intensively on this file. The provincial government was facing a situation that could have been catastrophic, but we worked hard. We became aware of the situation and made changes. Over the last 6 months, there has been a big change in mentality. We've realized that there is an issue. And I also want to mention something that was done in our region. I'm sorry, I have to interrupt because I have questions for the mayor as well. But we do need a strategy, and we need one quickly. Mayor, welcome. Did you participate in the federal consultations with the federal government? So I've been working with Bois-Sacco. I did not participate in any consultations, but I have been working so that my municipality be able to survive. We have 1,700 people living in our region who depend entirely on agriculture as well as on tourism, and 70% of the population depends upon the forest, as I said earlier. Like I said, we need to work together. I would invite you to raise your voice in these consultations, not just through the industry, but really speak on behalf of your community directly during these consultations. I know that that's how we do it where I'm from, and I invite you to do that, and that's what I am planning on doing, Ms. Chatel. Were you consulted with by the government of Quebec on this issue? Yes, we did participate in consultations. It was, I think, 2 years ago. Do you have requests for federal and provincial elected officials? Well, to work with our forestry companies. There are people here in my region that are able to offer solutions to our governments. And I think it's very important that we work together. Thank you. Mr. Simard, your turn. For some time, we've been talking about the anxiety that this has created in your areas, and I'm very well aware of this. 70%, Mayor, you said, of Sacré-Cœur residents depend upon forestry. And that includes Bois-Sacco, of course. Now, of course, we do not hope that the order be put into place, but what is the feeling in your area? Are people afraid? So this morning, I wouldn't speak of courage. I'd more so speak of determination. Yes, this has had impacts. I've spoken with people in Bois-Sacco. What we found is that in our municipality, there are practically no more requests for new builds, for construction. They're not asking for building permits anymore. So people are definitely nervous, and they're trying to protect the assets that they have. So I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that there are people in Sacré-Cœur that believe that if this order is implemented, they see this as the closure of their municipality. I think that yes, it is. What do you think about this recommendation, about the question of us needing to protect the caribou? And in your opinion, what would be the best means of protection, and which would be the most acceptable for your industry? Yes, thank you for the question. What I would say Firstly, you mentioned the fact that this species could go extinct, which is false. The woodland subspecies in Quebec is actually increasing in number. And we have chosen to protect certain subspecies more specifically, and we won't get into the details of why we made that decision. But when it comes to the strategy, yes, we do need a protection strategy. This order only targets one factor that has an influence on woodland caribou, and that is its habitat. And in protecting this habitat, we're actually basing this off of some misconceptions, because the caribou is influenced by a variety of factors, including predators. And I'm sure it's easy to understand that predators are the number one cause of death amongst the woodland caribou ecotype. And there are other factors as well. That being said, currently in this order, they do not address these elements. There are also elements that should be addressed by the the provincial government instead of the federal government. So they need to establish a plan that really works. And to do so, we need to look at all factors, including the most important factor, that being predators.
So now the second round, 5 minutes. We are here today to talk about the threat of the order. That's why we are here today. And I hear you speak. You're talking about predators, about development and management. So what would the order be good for aside from killing the forestry industry? Well, look, that's it. And your question is relevant, Mr. Martel, because in the end, the order is made with a unilateral type of vision. It doesn't take into account the other issues. So we can't get to any other observation than we're heading down the wrong path with this order. And I'd like to add something. When we were talking about solutions earlier, the provincial government, we've worked very hard to have the province understand the issues. And finally, they were aware of the issues. And I want to mention that there were things that were announced just in May. An area of 5,000 square kilometers that would be protected, and it would be doubled to 10,000 square kilometers. 10,000 square kilometers is 20 times the size of the island of Montreal. That's very significant. But it's as if it was nothing. So that's what's perplexing, what's unfortunate. There seems to be a sort of will, like a sort of blind will to protect, and nothing else seems to count. And sometimes the other impacts should be minimized. Our communities are directly affected. And we're going to do like people did 40 years ago. We'll have the same determination to continue with our sector. So if the order appears, Boissaco will be in trouble. And to the mayor. Yes, if the order goes forward as it is proposed today, it's the survival of Boissaco that's called into question. Inaudible. Everything I said earlier, our young people, those who are a little less young, how will they make a living? They've studied, they've trained to work in the forestry industry, and it would all go to waste. What would happen if it closed? What would happen in Sacré-Cœur? Sacré-Cœur becomes a ghost town. Or almost. Mr. Gilbert, climate change here. You sent a letter. Have you talked about climate change? You haven't heard back? We've written 7 letters to Prime Minister Trudeau and to Mr. Guilbold. We haven't heard back. After the 6th letter, it just says they've received them. But yes, climate change, the question you're asking is important. It's extremely important because, as I was saying, out west, there's research identifying climate change as being the most significant factor in disturbing the woodland ecotype. So increasingly, it's this phenomenon that needs to be addressed. And it's unanimous in the scientific community that the species are going north by 45 kilometers per decade. And a researcher was saying just last year, unfortunately he's passed away, this researcher, but there's recordings on this. He said that regarding climate change, it was inevitable. So moose and deer are going north, and their predators, the wolf, are going north too. And moose populations have gone up 5 times in Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean and around Pitmokin in the last 20 years. So all of this means there's like a movement that we won't be able to stop easily. It was said that there could be brakes put on climate change in about 300 years, not much before 300 years. That's what he said. So in the short term, a measure on the habitat, destroying forestry in that area, will that help caribou? That's magical thinking. It's wishful thinking. It's impossible. Do I have time left? 10 seconds about. Well, predators, because we've heard about wolves. They're a constant threat. And I read an article about what happened in the West. It's important to talk about this because on wolves, in 2 years, caribou, woodland ecotype, caribous have gone up. It hasn't been through the destruction of forestry. Mr. Lozo now. I've worked at the municipal level, Madam Mayor, and I care about serving people and being close to them. But as a government, we need to make decisions through consultations and through professionals. And we're in the process. You're part of the process. That's why we're here. If we didn't want to hear from you, you wouldn't be here today. We're listening to you. It's the time. You talked about a nice document that shows that the caribou isn't threatened in your area. Well, I'd be happy to see that document. I don't have it. I'd like to read it, and I'd like for you to officially table it with this committee so that we can read it and advance the study that is ongoing until September 15th. So, Madam Mayor, you know that the concept of consultation is important in small municipalities, but it's also important at the federal level. And the model we've chosen for consultations, well, it was an independent commission with recommendations from specialists. And that independent commission, you had time to have a look at it, but the mayor didn't. But it's based on your consultations. So the question is for you. Do you think that as a responsible government, our opponents often ask us, they often call for an independent commission for just about every issue. And for this issue, we did do an independent commission. Do you think that it's independent? And how could we do better next time with independent consultations on caribou? Mr. Lozo, you're talking about the current commission? Yes. So currently, this is happening because there was pressure put on the system. I would say that it's very unwieldy to have tried to go forward in a spirit of the threat of an order. The first technical meeting we had to talk about the order, we were told that the order had been prepared to balance protection and impacts on the people in the sector. That's exactly what we were told. Mr. Saint-Gelais, it was extended until September 15th, and we continue to consult you. It's in good faith. I can tell you it's in good faith because we're listening to you. We're here. Mr. Lozo, we were told that what was proposed was the draft and it couldn't change much. Then why do consultations in that spirit? The issues and the impacts on people hadn't been taken into account. And we were told, well, the project won't change much, the draft won't change much, but come talk to us anyways. But come on. this committee, you're saying, I don't know if it was in writing or orally, but you're saying that there was no point, it was already decided, and you already knew the final decision before I, as a federal elected official, I don't know what the final decision is. I still trust in the specialists. You know and I don't. Okay. And if you include forest fires and the eastern spruce budworm, the sector, well, it would be 58% for the rate of disturbance. Could you tell us more about that? I'll ask Andre. Just to rectify, in Pitmwakan, it's 80% disturbance currently. Those are the calculations that were done with the federal methodology. We've used the goals of the order and done the calculations with our experts on what could happen if the order went forward. And taking down all of the rows we could, and then it would be 49% of the rate of disturbance. The goal of the order is 35%. At 35%, well, 70% chances to have the population stay the same, but 49% wouldn't achieve that. So the order, the way it was made, looking just at habitat and not recognizing what the territory is like where we manage the forest, well, it's just wishful thinking. There won't be the effect they hope for. So it would destroy economies and lives for nothing. So in consultation, Mr. Saint-Gelais, your capacity to influence the government's decision, you thought it was minimal. That's the sense of the conversation you had with Mr. Lauzon. So I'd like to hear about that very briefly, please. At the first meeting, when we received the information, when it said, this is the order, there would be catastrophic impacts and it can't change much. So it didn't leave much hope. We continue to express ourselves in all possible ways. Mr. Boudris, I'm a little torn. I have information that seems contradictory. Waseko says you can't just preserve things. It won't work. But the species seems threatened or fragile in many ways. So I'd like to hear, in a spirit of finding solutions, what could be done to improve the situation currently that would be acceptable for you. I don't think we can just say we need to keep the status quo. But what could be done, in your opinion, that would be a step in the right direction, but that would also be acceptable for your workers? Well, we need to work with all of the information. What we've always suggested is that the solution go through coordination. We have to understand all of the issues. Controlling predators has to be part of a strategy in one way or another. We could adapt things on when we work. There are many things that can be done. We've suggested many solutions to the government of Quebec. It can't be done in just any way or in a rushed way. There are many stakeholders involved. First Nations, there are many stakeholders. When we say the solution has to be about coordination, that's what we mean. There can't be a steamroller pushing one solution. We need to have the capacity to establish the right solutions to have real impacts on the subspecies present in Quebec and for the woodland caribou. And that's what I really want to say. There's just one subspecies in Quebec. It's the woodland or boreal caribou. And that's where there are concerns. But caribou overall in Quebec is not threatened. Okay, thank you, Mr. Martel. Listen. First, the order is disastrous for the region, for communities. That's what I'm retaining from what we've discussed today. People could lose their jobs if the order is imposed. They won't have food on the table. Being able to have a roof over their head, that will be difficult for many. That's what's threatened currently. I'd like to know one thing. Has everything been done currently? Have all actions been taken? Has everything been done currently? everything been done for? Has everything been done to take into consideration that the order should be imposed? Well, look, what we believe is that with what the provincial government announced recently, with what's already being discussed, we know there are discussions already being held to work on solutions. We've proposed solutions. The provincial government is analyzing, reflecting, and suggesting more solutions. So we need to be able to establish solutions that will take into account all of the facts and issues. So that is the solution. That's what we need to do. Take into account all of the facts and the issues. We need to take the time to do it well, to not rush forward with an order that didn't take into account any of the other impacts. So that's what I could answer. Thanks. That's all for my questions. The question I have for you is, do you find that the absence of concrete policies to address caribou here in Quebec is a challenge for you? Does that contribute to uncertainty, regulatory uncertainty that you face, that your industry faces?
Je vous dirais, Madame.
Ms. Chalan, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Yes. So what's clear is that uncertainty is always harmful. Like I said, over the past 4 years, we've been able to work intensively to ensure that the provincial government understands the importance of measured, clear, intentional decisions. And we've been working to find solutions together. But with this order, I would say we're back at square one. Because when they announce this type of order, this could mean that they can force their hand over the situation. So we're already facing the impacts of these things because we have entrepreneurs who are asking us questions, asking if they should start looking elsewhere, if we face problems, also with clients. I'm sorry, I apologize, I have to interrupt. It's just that we know that the government of Quebec has spoken of establishing a strategy since 2016. But we're here to work in a collaborative manner. We want to put aside ideologies and different jurisdictions to find a proper solution that will be a balance between conserving a caribou as well as meeting regional needs, economic needs. Do you recognize the fact that the province does have an important role to play in this issue? What we're saying is that we need to set aside this order, put an end to it, and then we need to continue to work together with the governments. We're not here to do politics. We have bigger problems to deal with other than politics. So yes, we want an environment where we are all working hand in hand to find solutions that will help us in the future to protect the caribou, protect the forest, and protect our industry. So that's our goal. But in order to do that, we need to set aside this threat of the order that really is bringing us back to square one.